The smell of recycled air and cold metal was the first thing Lena noticed when she woke up on the ship. The second thing she noticed was that someone had nailed a yellow warning sign on the door across the corridor. It had so many symbols on it that she had to count them. 7 different warnings on one door. She was 7 years old. She thought that was interesting. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Wade, was already awake and moving around the small cabin they shared. Sarah was the kind of woman who moved with purpose even before her first cup of anything. She had short, dark hair, ink-stained fingers, and the permanent look of someone doing 3 things in her head at once. "Don't touch the door across the hall," Sarah said, without turning around. "I wasn't going to," Lena said. She had been thinking about it. The ship was called the Ardent Cross. It was big enough to feel like a small town if you walked the right corridors, and small enough to feel like a box if you stayed in your cabin too long. Lena had already memorized 2 levels of it. She planned to memorize the rest. They had been flying for 4 days. The destination was a place called Vetra Station, where a lot of very serious people were going to sit in a room and talk about very serious things. Lena's mother was one of the serious people. Lena had been allowed to come because there had been nobody back home to leave her with, and because Lena had looked at her mother with the specific expression that made Sarah feel guilty even when she had done nothing wrong. On the 5th day, the ship held a briefing. Lena was not invited. She sat outside the door and listened anyway. Admiral Otto was speaking. He had a voice like a door closing. He told the assembled crew and guests that the Ardent Cross had been given an additional task. In the lower hold, in a containment chamber built from 6 layers of energy shielding and 1 layer of prayer, was a creature. Its name, according to the only record that had ever successfully catalogued it, was Dravath. Lena had never heard that name before. She tucked it away. The Admiral explained that Dravath was being transported to Vetra Station along with the diplomatic delegation. The creature was sedated. It was secure. There was no reason for alarm. He said this in the tone of a man who was himself somewhat alarmed. One of the delegates asked what the creature was exactly. The Admiral paused. He said that was a complicated question. Then he said that in the last 200 years, Dravath had been near 3 inhabited moons when they stopped being inhabited. He said the coalition's top scientists believed the creature's uncontrolled presence caused matter to break down. He said that every ship which had gotten close to it without proper shielding had never filed another report. He said the working plan, once they reached Vetra Station, was to study it briefly and then destroy it. He said this the way you say something you have already decided and do not wish to discuss further. Lena sat on the floor outside the door with her knees pulled up to her chest and thought about what she had heard. She had heard dangerous creature, lower hold, nobody knows exactly what it is, everyone is scared of it, the plan is to kill it. What she had not heard, and what was bothering her in a way she could not quite name, was any part where someone mentioned asking it anything. Later, her mother came out of the briefing and nearly tripped over her. "Lena, I was just sitting in front of a closed briefing room. The floor is comfortable here." Sarah looked at her daughter for a long moment. Lena looked back. This was a thing they did sometimes, this looking, and it usually ended with Sarah sighing. Sarah sighed. "You heard some of it." "The answer is no. You are not going to the lower hold. You are not going anywhere near the lower hold. You are not going to find the lower hold on a map and memorize the route to it." Lena said nothing. This was different from agreeing, but it was easy to mistake it for agreeing if you were busy. Sarah was always busy. That night, Lena lay in her bunk and looked at the ceiling. The ship made a low, constant hum. Somewhere, far below where she was lying, through several floors of metal and wire and shielding, something was sleeping, something that the whole galaxy was afraid of, something that nobody had ever tried to talk to. She thought about the 7 warning signs on the door across the hall. She thought about the Admiral's voice when he said the word destroy. She thought about what her mother always told her. which was that the universe was full of things that looked scary and turned out to be fine, and things that looked fine and turned out to be scary, and the only way to tell the difference was to pay attention. Lena was very good at paying attention. She closed her eyes. She was already thinking about the air duct schematics she had seen on her mother's open tablet that afternoon. She had only glanced at them for a moment. But she had a very good memory. The Vithran shuttle docked at midday. Lena watched it through the porthole in Corridor 7, which was one of the corridors she had already memorized. The shuttle was angular and pale, like a tooth with wings. It connected to the Ardent Cross with a sound like a sigh, and then the docking door opened and the Vithrans came through. There were 5 of them. They were tall, thin, and moved in a way that reminded Lena of tall grass bending in wind. Their skin was a deep blue-gray. Their eyes were large and compound, like the eyes of an insect, and each eye had 6 separate lenses arranged like a flower. Lena thought they were one of the more interesting things she had ever seen. The one at the front was very old. He walked like he was used to rooms going quiet when he entered them. His name, she would learn, was Koru. He was the head of the Vithran delegation, and he had the expression of someone who had already decided what they thought about everything and was simply waiting for others to catch up. The one at the back was young. He was barely taller than the others, but he held himself differently, a little uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to be here. He was looking at the ship, with his 6-lensed eyes moving in quick little adjustments, taking everything in. He turned the corner and almost walked directly into Lena. He stopped, his 6 eyes focused all at once, which looked strange and also somehow very attentive. Lena looked up at him. "Hello," she said. The young Vithran made a sound that was not quite a word. He looked around the corridor as if hoping someone would come and explain the situation to him. Nobody came. "I'm Lena," she said. "I am," he stopped, tried again. His translator collar clicked softly. "My name is Rin. I am assigned to escort the delegation." He said this last part as if reminding himself. "Why are you here? This is an official coalition vessel." "I know, I live here. Well, for now. My mom is Dr. Wade. She's a xenobiologist." Rin looked at her for a long moment. "You are a child." "Yes," Lena agreed. "Children do not come on official vessels. My mom didn't have anywhere to leave me." Rin seemed to process this. His 6 eyes moved in slightly different directions, which Lena was starting to understand was the Vithran version of a confused expression. "That is very human," he said finally. He did not sound entirely disapproving. Lena pointed at his face. "Do all 6 of your lenses see the same thing?" "No, each has a different range. I can see infrared and shortwave radiation simultaneously with visible light." "That's amazing," Lena said, with complete sincerity. Rin's skin shifted slightly, a faint warmer tone moving through the gray-blue. Lena didn't know it yet, but that was a Vithran blush. They walked together for a while after that, which was not planned by either of them, but happened anyway. Rin was supposed to be shadowing the delegation, but Karu had not told him to stay close, and so he found himself walking with a 7-year-old human girl through the corridors of the Ardent Cross. "There is a creature on this ship," Rin said after a while. He said it carefully, like he was checking whether she already knew. "Dravath," Lena said. Rin stopped walking. "You know that name." "I listened outside the briefing room." He looked at her. "You should not have done that." "Probably," she agreed. "Is it sad?" Rin went very still, his 6 eyes held on her face. "What?" "The creature, Dravath, is it sad? It's all alone down there." Rin did not say anything for a long moment. He was thinking about the Vithran records he had read, the ones that were very old and written by the first Vithrans who had encountered the creature. He was thinking about certain words in those records that the senior delegates never liked to discuss. Words like confusion and distress. "I don't know," he said at last, and that was honest. Lena nodded, as if this was an acceptable answer, and kept walking. That evening, the instruments in the lower hold registered something new. The scientists watching the readouts called it a behavioral anomaly and wrote it in the log. What the instruments showed was a change in Dravath's energy pattern, not aggression, not distress, something slower and more uncertain. The closest word any of them could find was attention. Dravath was paying attention to something. The scientists could not identify what. The creature was still fully sedated. The containment fields were all green. There was nothing in the hold. They logged it and moved on. 2 levels up, Lena lay on her bunk and looked at the schematic she had sketched from memory in the margins of her notebook. The air duct routes on the lower levels, the maintenance corridors, the path that avoided the manned checkpoints. She was not planning anything. She was just drawing. She fell asleep with the notebook on her chest and the pencil still in her hand. The maintenance corridor smelled like dust and old wiring. It was also very dark and very narrow, and Lena had to press her arms to her sides to fit through one particular bend. She was wearing her socks with the yellow stars on them because she had not wanted to make noise putting on her shoes. She had left at the 3rd hour of the night cycle when the corridor outside their cabin had gone quiet. She had counted the seconds between each pass of the night patrol, 140, more than enough. She followed the route she had memorized, left at the junction with the painted red pipe, down the service ladder carefully rung by rung, through the narrow corridor that ran alongside the outer hull, where the cold came through and raised the skin on her arms. Then the last turn, and the door marked with a symbol she now knew meant observation access, authorized personnel only. The door was not locked. It had a keypad lock, but the keypad lock required a 4-digit code, and 4-digit codes were almost always written down somewhere nearby by someone who used them every day and didn't want to forget them. The code was on a small piece of tape on the inside of the junction panel, 2 steps to the left. Lena typed it in. The door clicked open. The observation room was small. 1 window, thick as a wall, looking into the hold. 1 chair that nobody was sitting in. A row of dark instrument panels on standby. The main hold was lit by a low blue light, the kind that didn't interfere with the containment fields. And then there was Dravath. Lena had tried to imagine it. She had heard the words, living dark matter, stellar fire, enormous, unstable, dangerous. She thought she had built a picture in her head. The picture was wrong. It was not just big. It filled the hold the way darkness fills a room, not by taking up space but by being the space. Its body was black in a way that was different from the black of the walls, a black with depth to it, the way deep water looks black even when you know there is something beneath. And moving through it slowly were lines of deep red light, not bright, not sharp, dim and slow and rhythmic, like something breathing that was much larger than lungs. Lena stood at the window for a full minute and did not say anything. She had seen a lot of things that other people found scary. Spiders, and the kid in the year above her who yelled all the time, and the medical scanner that had made that horrible sound when she was 4. She had been scared of things too, but this was different. This was something her body was not built to understand, something that pressed on a part of her brain that had no language, only old animal silence. She stood in the silence for a minute. Then she pressed her hand flat against the glass. "Hi," she said quietly, "my name is Lena." Nothing moved in the hold. "I heard about you," she said. "Well, I listened when they were talking about you. They didn't know I was there." She paused. "I do that sometimes. Listen." The red lines in the dark mass moved, not faster, just differently, like something shifting its weight. "I think they're scared of you," Lena said. "Most people are, I think, but I also think." She stopped, picked the words carefully the way her mother had taught her, because some things were worth saying right. "I think being scary and being bad aren't the same thing. My mother said that. She says the universe is full of things that look one way but are another way. You have to pay attention." The lines of red light slowed. Then, from the center of the dark mass, something moved. Not a limb exactly. It was more like the darkness had decided to extend one part of itself. A tendril, slow and wide, moving toward the glass with the careful heaviness of something that was not used to being gentle, but was trying. It stopped at the glass, directly across from Lena's hand. Lena looked at her hand on the glass. She looked at the tendril on the other side. She did not move. "Are you lonely?" she asked. The red lines pulsed, once slowly. Lena was 7. She was not a scientist, and she did not know how to interpret biological data or energy readings. But she had spent her whole life in small spaces with her mother, learning to read the things that didn't have words. She knew what it looked like when something was trying to say yes and didn't know how. "I'm sorry," she said. "That's a terrible thing to be." On the night watch console, one level up, a panel lit up, then another. The officer on duty looked up from his report. All the sensors in the lower hold had gone active at once. He checked for a breach. He checked the containment readings. Everything was green. He saw nothing in the camera feed except the empty observation room and the creature at rest. He marked it as a sensor fluctuation and went back to his report. In the observation room, Lena stayed at the window for a long time. She talked, and the darkness listened, and the red lines moved like answers. She was still there when the night cycle ended and the ship's lights began to rise. She did not notice. It was the junior engineer on morning shift who noticed first. He had come to relieve the night watch officer, pulled up the hold feed for the standard check, and then sat there for a moment, not saying anything. Then he said, very quietly, "There is a child in the observation room." The night watch officer came and looked over his shoulder. Then the night watch officer hit every alarm he could reach at once. The sound was enormous. It rolled through the ship like a wave, every corridor, every level. Lights switched from night blue to full white. Doors sealed and then unsealed, and then sealed again in a cascade of confused automated responses. People came out of their cabins pulling on jackets. Sarah Wade came out of her cabin, looked at Lena's empty bunk, and felt every muscle in her body go cold. She was in the lower hold corridor before the second alarm finished sounding. She had not put on shoes. By the time Admiral Otto arrived, 30 seconds behind her, there were already 6 security officers outside the observation room door and 2 scientists with handheld scanners pressed against the wall looking at readings they could not explain. Rin was there too. He had followed the Vithran delegation down, which meant Koru was there as well, grey-blue and rigid, standing slightly apart from everyone else the way people stand when they want to make clear they are not part of the chaos. Through the window of the observation room, they could all see Lena. She was standing with her hand flat against the glass. Dravath was on the other side, that enormous dark tendril pressed opposite her palm, steady and still. The two of them had been there long enough that Lena had stopped noticing the cold. She was talking. No one outside could hear what she was saying through the thick glass. Her lips were moving. Dravath had not moved except for the slow pulse of the red lines. Calm. The instruments said calm. The instruments had never said calm about Dravath before. Every previous reading had been either sedated suppression or active distress. This was something else. The scientists looking at the numbers kept checking them against each other as if expecting a mistake. Koru spoke. His voice was flat and controlled. Remove the child and initiate termination sequence. This is exactly the kind of unpredictable interaction that makes the creature dangerous. It hasn't moved, one of the scientists said, without looking up from the scanner. It is a predator. That is what predators do before they move. Sir, the energy signature is. Remove the child, Koru said again. Otto held up one hand. Nobody is opening that door until I understand what I'm looking at. Sarah pushed through to the front. She looked through the window at her daughter. Her heart was doing several things at once. Fear was one of them. There was also something else, something she recognized as the same feeling she got when she was reading a paper and a result came up that nobody had predicted and the data was still clean, that specific feeling of the world being larger than expected. The readings are stable, she said quietly, more stable than anything in the containment logs. Your child broke into a secured area, Otto said. Yes, I know, I'll deal with that. She did not look away from the window, But look at those numbers. Rin was looking at the numbers. His 6 eyes moved across each readout in sequence, reading them the way Vithrans read, all at once. He had studied the Dravath case files more carefully than the rest of the delegation because he had always found something wrong about the official account and could never point to exactly what. Now, looking at the readings, he felt the wrongness resolve into something he could almost name. Inside the observation room, Lena had stopped talking. She looked at her hand on the glass. She looked at the tendril on the other side. She thought about the long night, all the hours she had spent just talking, and how the red lines had answered in their slow, patient way. She thought about what lonely really meant, not the kind of lonely that lasted a weekend, but the kind that lasted longer than anyone had ever counted. She kissed her palm, the way her mother kissed her hand when she was sick, the way that meant I see you and I'm here and you're not alone. She pressed her palm back against the glass. Every alarm on the ship went silent. Not off, silent. The way things go silent when something absorbs all the available sound. The instruments in the corridor didn't flatline. They went perfectly, completely steady, every reading landing on a number and staying there without variation. Dravath had gone still. Not the stillness of a predator, not the stillness of something waiting. The stillness of something that had been given a thing it did not have a name for and was holding it very carefully. The red lines inside the dark mass slowed to the pace of a breath. In the corridor, nobody spoke. Koru's mouth was open. He closed it, opened it again. No words arrived. Rin looked at the elder delegate. He had known Koru for 9 years. He had never seen his face do what it was doing now. It was not anger. It was not calculation. It was the face of someone looking at something their entire understanding had failed to account for. Otto looked at his hands for a moment, then at the window. Inside, Lena pressed her forehead against the glass and said something. None of them could hear it through the shielding. Dravath's red lines pulsed once, warm and slow. It looked to every person in that corridor exactly like an answer. 3 hours after the alarms went silent, the corridor outside the observation room had emptied down to 4 people. Otto had sent the security team back to their posts. The Vithran delegation had returned upstairs, except for Rin, who had stayed without being asked and without asking permission. Inside the observation room, Lena had sat down on the floor. Her back was against the glass, her knees pulled up, her head tipped sideways against the cold surface. Dravath was still against the other side, the dark mass settled, the red lines pulsing slow and even. Every time someone had tried to take Lena out of the room, Dravath had shifted. Not aggressively, not with any clear threat. Just a change in the pulse of the lights, a subtle movement of the dark mass toward the glass, and the instruments would spike, and the scientists would go still and look at each other, and no one would open the door. So she stayed. Sarah sat on the floor of the corridor with her back against the wall, looking at the readouts on a tablet. Rin sat nearby, less certain about floor sitting, but doing it anyway. Otto had pulled up a chair from somewhere. The sedation should still be active, the head scientist said for the 3rd time. He was standing at his instruments, reading the same numbers over and over as if they would change. The dose was calculated for a creature this size. It should be unconscious. Clearly the dose calculation was wrong, Sarah said. Or, Rin said carefully, the creature is choosing not to be sedated. Everyone looked at him. Rin kept his eyes on the tablets Sarah had passed to him. There are records, he said, old ones, Vithran records from the first contact event 300 years ago. They were not shared with the coalition because at the time the Vithran Council did not consider them relevant. He paused. I have always considered that decision a mistake. Otto folded his hands. What do the records say? That Dravath was not attacking the first Vithran station it encountered. The station's own logs show it passing at a distance. The Vithran ships intercepted it. They fired first. Rin said this without drama, the way you say something you have known for a long time and have been waiting for the right moment to put down somewhere. Dravath's response caused the damage, but the contact was not initiated by the creature. The scientist at the instruments turned slowly. That's not in any coalition file. No, it is not. Sarah stared at the tablet. She was thinking about the 3 moons. She was thinking about the language she had been developing for 6 years to describe Dravath's energy signatures, the language that the coalition had funded and then quietly defunded twice. She was thinking about the first morning she had shown Lena the star charts, and Lena had pointed to the notation next to Dravath's last known position, and asked what the little red mark meant, and Sarah had said it means something we don't understand yet. She had meant it as a scientific statement. It turned out to be true in ways she hadn't expected. If the initial contact was a panic response, Sarah said slowly, and the moons were also panic responses, then we have spent 200 years making it worse. Every encounter has been an attack. Every ship that got close was a threat. It has never had one interaction that wasn't either a weapon or a cage. Nobody said anything. It's been alone, Sarah said. The word came out smaller than she intended. For longer than we've had spaceflight. Rin looked through the window at Lena, sitting on the floor with her back to the glass, and Dravath on the other side, red lines pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Your daughter did not come down here with a plan, he said. She came because it seemed sad. She's 7. Yes, Rin looked at Sarah, and she is the first living thing that Dravath has not flinched from in recorded history. I think that is worth noting. Otto was quiet for a long time. He was a man who had handled difficult diplomatic situations for 30 years. He had negotiated between species who literally could not look at each other without chemical reactions making them ill. He had been in rooms where every word could end a war or start one. None of it had prepared him for the particular weight of this corridor, and a child on the other side of thick glass, and a monster that wasn't. I need to call Vetra Station, he said. What will you tell them? Sarah asked. He looked through the window. Lena had fallen asleep against the glass. Dravath had not moved. The red lines went on pulsing, steady and warm. I don't know yet, he said, but the plan has changed. That much I know. He stood, put the chair back, and walked to the corridor. He had a very long call to make and no idea how to start it. Sarah stayed, Rin stayed. Through the glass, Lena slept. And Dravath, the most feared thing in the universe, did something that none of the scientists watching could immediately find a category for. It curled, slowly, carefully, the way something curls when it is settling in beside warmth. It gathered itself closer to the glass. Sarah watched. She did not write it in the log right away. She just watched. Some things needed to be seen before they could be written. Vetra Station was built to be impressive. Its central chamber, where the coalition summit met, had a ceiling so high that the top of it was always in faint shadow. The walls curved inward like a bowl. Every seat faced the center, and the center had a raised platform from which speakers addressed the assembly. It was designed so that every word spoken there felt important. Koru walked to the platform, and the room went as quiet as rooms go when someone with authority stands at the front. He had his notes, he had his arguments, he had the votes already counted in his head because he had done the counting 3 days ago on the ship, and the numbers had been clear. Termination order, immediate. The Dravath situation ended here. He opened his mouth. He stood there for a moment with his mouth open and his notes in front of him. He thought about the observation corridor, the instruments, the silence after a small hand pressed against glass. He thought about the way his voice had broken when he tried to speak, and he was still not over the humiliation of it, the way a thing can be humiliating and also true at the same time. He thought about 9 words, which were the words Lena had said to Rin in the corridor when they first met, said the way children say things, without armor. I think it's sad. Is it sad? He thought about 40 years of Vithran Council meetings and diplomatic negotiations and position papers, and every time the word Dravath had come up, and nobody, not once, not ever, had asked that question. He closed his mouth, he folded his notes, he stepped off the platform and returned to his seat. The chamber buzzed. Delegates looked at each other. The Vithran delegation stared at Koru. Koru stared at the table in front of him. Otto moved to the platform next. He had spent the 3 days of travel from the Ardent Cross to Vetra Station writing what he wanted to say. It was not a speech designed to win a vote. It was not clever. It was just a statement of what he had seen. He said, a child went down to that hold without a weapon or a plan or a theory. She went because she thought something was alone, and that seemed wrong to her. He said the creature that had destroyed 3 moons and was feared by every spacefaring species in the known galaxy had responded to being spoken to kindly by going still for the first time in its recorded history. He said he did not have an explanation for that. He said he did not think termination was the right response to something you did not yet have an explanation for. Sarah presented the data, numbers, charts, the energy readings before and after, the comparison to every other Dravath encounter in Coalition records. The difference was visible in the charts like a change in weather. Every other encounter spiked and burned. The observation room readings looked like a flat, calm sea. The debate went on for hours. Some delegates were unmoved. 2 factions still wanted termination, one of them very loudly. They talked about the moons. They talked about the ships. They talked about risk and stability and what precedent it set to change policy because of one anomalous data point involving a human child. Sarah from her seat said that the child was not the data point. The creature's response was, children were not a unit of measurement, she said. Curiosity was not a variable. What was a variable was whether a living thing, when treated as a living thing instead of a threat, behaved like one. Near the end, when the debate had started going in circles, Koru stood up. He did not go to the platform. He stood at his seat. He was old enough that when he stood in a room, people noticed, and the room went quiet. He said, I have been in this assembly for 40 years. I have voted on 11 military actions, 3 exterminations, and 2 species classifications. I have not been wrong often. He paused. I was wrong about this. I know I was wrong because a human child who has been alive for 7 years understood something that I have spent 40 years failing to understand, and she understood it by doing nothing more complicated than being kind. He sat down. The vote passed. Moratorium on termination, indefinite. A new commission to study Dravath as a sapient entity, co-chaired by Sarah, with Rin as the Vithran representative. The chamber emptied slowly, the way chambers do after a long day. Lena was not there. She was back on the docked Ardent Cross, in the observation corridor, sitting on the chair that Otto had left there and not taken back. She had her notebook in her lap, and she was telling Dravath about Vetra Station, the way the ceiling disappeared into shadow, the way the seats were arranged in a circle, the way the vote had worked. Dravath's red lines pulsed. They voted to keep you safe, Lena said. That means nobody's going to hurt you now. Well, my mom says it's more complicated than that, but that's the part that matters. Pulse warm, slow. I know you can't talk, Lena said. I mean, not like this, but I think you understand. I think you have for a long time and nobody asked. She pressed her hand to the glass. The pulse on the other side matched it. She sat there until her mother came to find her, and then she sat there a little longer, and Sarah sat down on the floor beside her and did not say anything either, because some rooms do not need more words. Outside the ship's window, Vetra Station glowed against the black. 10,000 years of recorded history. Every weapon, every study, every diplomatic term for something no one had ever tried to reach. And a girl in star-covered socks who thought, maybe it's lonely. That was all, that was the whole of it. The universe had needed someone to ask.